I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. We're bringing together experts, thinkers, and leaders, busting myths, sharing stories, and staying connected when Canadians need it the most. We're having unexpected conversations for unprecedented times. Hi, everyone. Super excited today to be speaking to Dr. Gabor Maté, a world-renowned expert, a Vancouverite, and really, I'm a big fan of all of your books. So thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Just for some background on some of your work, you talk a lot about trauma and stress and illness. And my favorite book is When the Body Says No. It's one of those books that I think it should be mandatory reading because there's so much to learn in there. I didn't find the book until I was really sick, and because this book came out in 2003, right?
Yep.
And you make this. It made sense to me. Trauma and stress, and your body remembers, right? So, can we talk a little bit about what our body does remember?
There's actually a book called The Body Remembers.
Yes, I have that one too.
And another one called The Body Keeps the Score by a trauma psychiatrist. And then there's my book, When the Body Says No. First of all, it really comes down to how you see human beings. Do you see them as the medical ideology sees it, as a collection of organs and body systems and cells and hormones? In other words, do you see the body simply as a physiological entity?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you see the human being as a unshakable and inextricable unity of mind and body? Now, you said you were sick, and I'm not going to ask you about the details of it. I mean, you can share whatever you want, but I'm not going to ask you about it. But my question to you is, when you went to see your physicians, first of all, your GP, secondly, any specialist that you saw, anybody ask you about your childhood, any traumas?
Not once.
Did anybody ask you about your relationship with significant others in your life at the present time?
Not once.
Did anybody ask you how you feel about your work?
Not once.
Did anybody ask you about how you feel about yourself as a human being, whether you see yourself as worthwhile or not, whether you think you're lovable or not?
Not once.
Anybody ask you about any stress in your life?
Not once.
All those questions have everything to do with why you got sick.
I had cancer. So this book spoke deeply to me.
So if you had cancer, I'll tell you about you. You were suppressing your emotions all your life, and you're one of these people that have difficulty experiencing or expressing anger in a healthy way. And you tend to suppress yourself to please other people. Now, is that accurate or not?
Yeah, it's bang on.
The problem is that it's science that they don't teach in the medical schools. When I say science, I'm not talking about some alternative science. I'm talking about science documented in multiple thousands of studies showing that the mind and the body can't be separated, showing that the emotional system in the brain is part and parcel of the same system that the nervous system is a part of, that the hormonal apparatus is a part of, that our digestive system, that our cardiovascular system, and especially the immune system. So these are not separate systems. You see, when we were one-celled organisms, the one-celled organism had all these functions. They were all in one cell. Now, as we become multi-cell organisms and multi-system organisms, that unity is still there. It's just that there's systems that have to take care of each of these aspects of our self-defense and self-maintenance apparatus. But that unity, the connections between them was never broken. And now we have the science to show how these connections actually work. In other words, what I'm saying is that you can't separate the person's emotional and mental systems from their physiology. And that's obvious because all I'd have to do is to scream at you right now and your physiology, you would change. This happens 24/7. That's the first point. The second point is How these systems work are programmed in childhood, beginning in the uterus. In other words, you can stress pregnant women or pregnant animals, and you can predict certain things about the adult
Wow.
20 years later, particularly about how to handle stress. So that not only can't you separate the mind from the body, you also can't separate the individual from the environment. And the most important aspect of their environment is naturally the maternal body in which we're gestated for 9 months, and then our relationship with our primary caregivers in our formative years of life. And we now know that what happens in those years affects the functions of your genes, important systems in the brain, your immune system, your stressor apparatus, and everything else. And furthermore, those character traits that I enumerated as probably characterizing you if you had cancer, and you agree that they weren't born with them. They were adaptations, because no infant is born suppressing their feelings. I mean, have you seen an infant that suppresses their feelings?
Yeah.
So when we do it, it's for a good reason. It's because their environment couldn't handle our feelings. Not because their parents didn't love you, but I mean, I don't know what happened. And again, I'm not going to ask, but they were too stressed. They were too traumatized. They just couldn't handle who you were. So to fit in with their expectations, you have to suppress yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when you suppress yourself emotionally, you're also suppressing the immune system because of this unity that I was talking about. The brain is actually formed by our experiences. The brain is not determined by our genetics. The potentials are determined by our genetics, but how the potentials are unfold or are frustrated has to do with our early environment. So the early experiences actually shape the brain.
Right.
And so when it comes to the brain chemicals of addiction, if you are traumatized, your brain is going to be deficient in certain chemicals that the drugs will then give you.
Mm.
Number one. So that the adult brain itself is a product of childhood experience. Now, this is not, I'm not telling anything weird. I'm telling what brain science tells us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you what brain science is not taught at the University of British Columbia Medical School yet, despite the fact that this information has been out for decades. Now, that's astonishing to me. The average medical student doesn't get a single lecture on trauma and its relationship to brain development.
Mm.
If they even get a single lecture on brain development, which they don't, not in relationship to how the environment shapes brain development. It's just basic science that our doctors are not being taught. It's not their fault. They're not being taught it.
Mm-hmm.
No,
Mm-hmm.
that's the first point. The second point is when you're abused, sexually abused, or neglected, physically hurt, you have a lot of emotional pain. Now, anybody who's ever had an addiction to anything, whether it's to drugs, or in my case, to work, or to shopping, or people who are addicted to sex, or to gambling, or whatever it is, it's always an escape from emotional pain. Where does that pain originates from? So let me give you an instance again. This is a party trick I do, if you can call it that. I'm going to give you a definition of an addiction. Okay,
Okay.
an addiction is any behavior that a person finds temporary pleasure or relief in, and therefore craves, but suffers negative consequences as a result of, and can't give up despite the negative consequences. So craving pleasure relief in the short term, negative impact on the long term, refusal to give it up. That's what an addiction is. I didn't say anything about drugs. It could be to drugs, could be to liquor, could be to caffeine, could be to cigarettes, could be to sex, gambling, shopping, all the things I said before, eating, of course, work. No, again, I'm going to ask you, without asking for any details, by that definition, have you ever had an addiction in your life?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you what it was or when it was. I'm just going to ask you what you liked about it. What did it do for you?
It's an instant, it's that feeling, a euphoric feeling for,
Made you feel good?
yeah,
Is that good or bad?
it's a good thing.
Yeah. Anything else it did for you? By the way, okay, no, let me just wait for your answer.
I don't know if it did. I'm just thinking more along the lines of like if I'm feeling bad, or I will buy myself something. That's something I've done a lot.
Okay, so
Uh,
here's
you
what I would
know,
ask. So here's what I would ask you. So first of all, the first point is the addiction is not your primary problem. This idea of addiction being a disease is nonsense. It behaves like a disease, but it actually starts off as a solution to a problem.
mm,
The problem of feeling bad in life.
mm-hmm,
Now, the more negative experiences you had as a child, the worse you're going to feel in life. And so the addiction comes along. Okay, I'm going to make you feel better.
mm-hmm,
The second question is, why can't you handle feeling bad? Life is This is not a criticism, it's a question. Life imposes disappointments and suffering. That's just, we lose creatures or people close to us. We get disappointed, our expectations are frustrated. We're going to feel bad at times. That's a part of life. Why can't we handle it? We can't handle it because when we were small, our environment didn't support us through those times of feeling bad. That's why the feeling bad becomes so intolerable. So addictions are always a response to intolerable pain and stress.
right, right.
So then we take these people, like our First Nations population, and other people who are abused and traumatized. The rest of us, we turn to our alcohol or our cigarettes or our work or our shopping or our eating, but they've been so hurt they need these drugs, and we make them criminals.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when they die of overdoses, it's no big public crisis. Like with like the COVID
Right.
has killed, I don't know how many people in Canada. Is it a couple of thousand yet? I'm not sure what they.
Yeah, it's a few thousand. Yes.
Okay, well that's how many people died of overdoses in Canada last year.
Mm-hmm. Well,
But
it's interesting that you say that because I feel like this pandemic has really highlighted a lot of things that many of us knew were wrong in our world, and it's highlighted them to make the and so then we have our armchair experts who speak up about seniors in care, and it shouldn't be this way, or people, vulnerable people, this and vulnerable. And I hope that when we get to the other side of this, that we do have a different lens and we have a more empathetic lens to people who are not privileged to be in, a home with a backyard and have, friends and everything that they need to sort of get through this period. But when it comes to you speak so much about our relationships with others and our early, our childhoods, right? And many of us are at home with our children 24/7 right now. And I know that I never want to repeat, the mistakes that I feel were made in my childhood. And I'm always, conscious of how I speak to my children and how my relationship with them is the most important thing I have. Are you seeing, are people's relationships changing when we're in isolation during this pandemic?
well, I think we're seeing a number of different dynamics. It depends who those people are. Is that the rate of domestic abuse has gone up under the COVID crisis. Why?
Yes.
Because people have fewer opportunities to resolve their stresses outside the home. And so the stresses that they're carrying inside, since they cannot divert them or not resolve them, but divert them and somehow soothe them, they can't go to the pub, they can't go to work. If they haven't dealt with those stresses, now they're going to take them out on the people at home. So there's been lots of increase internationally. There's been an increase in domestic abuse, which of course children are witnessing now, or if they might even be the subjects of it. That's
Mm-hmm.
on the one hand. On the other hand, parents who are a bit more conscious, perhaps, and perhaps a bit more emotionally evolved, might find an opportunity here to hey, you know what? Because I want to tell you something. The way that parents have to beat their kids now, that's how human beings evolved. Human beings have been on this present species, our species, Homo sapiens, has been on the earth for 150,000 to 200,000 years. Until 11,000 years ago, so until the blink of an eye ago, kids spent the whole day with their parents. Not just with their parents, other nurturing adults and playmates of multiple ages. This is how we evolved. How we live in this society, in the segregated, isolated nuclear family with a mother or a father, or a mother and father at home alone with the kids. That's never how it was meant to be. It's never how it was. And so some people are discovering that, hey, my relationship with my kids is deepening now because I'm with them all the time, and I have to really, as you said about yourself, you have to really look at yourself. How am I talking to them?
Mm.
Interacting with them? And so it's a real opportunity to kind of re-experience, but in an isolated way, unfortunately, the proximity that human beings throughout evolution have always had with their children. And let me tell you something, there's lots of studies that show that small band hunter-gatherers are primal form of existence. They parent a lot better than we do in multiple ways.
I can see that.
You know,
It's interesting because we live in a time where everybody is so busy and too busy to do this and too busy to do that. Your kids are gone for 6 hours a day at school, and then you get home and you make them dinner, and everybody goes to bed, and you get up and it's the big rat race again. We don't have that right now. Many of us, we're at home. Things are slower. And you're right. I mean, everybody's experiencing this differently, and we'll never be able to paint. We can't paint everybody with the same brush. But, if there is trauma in your childhood and as you grow up, can you repair that? I'm somebody who's been trying to repair trauma my entire life. Uh, and I still don't feel like I've fixed it all. Do we ever fix it all?
um, I've written my epitaph. You know what's going to be carved onto my gravestone? It's going to say, it was a lot more work than I had anticipated. And I was talking last week to a 92-year-old woman, very famous. Her name is Edith Eger, Eger. She's written a book called The Secret, international bestseller. She was on the same train to Auschwitz that my grandparents were on.
Wow.
But she survived. She was 16 years old. She's now 92, I think. And she's a psychotherapist, still working.
Amazing.
And I was talking to her briefly, and I said, I haven't got over it yet. And she said, don't think you'll ever get over it. So getting over it in the sense of being perfect is not the point, however. And nor should you even strive for it. Consciousness is what you strive for. To be aware that when the trauma is showing up, you don't mistake it for reality. So when your kid speaks to you in a certain way and you get into a rage because I feel you don't respect me, that's not a feeling. I don't respect you as an opinion. What you're really feeling is your own sense of lack of a value that is your traumatic imprint. Now, if you can recognize that your kid speaking to you in a certain way has nothing to do with you not having value, it's just a kid talking in a certain way because they're acting out something, then you say, hey, I really don't like it when you talk to me in that tone of voice. But you're not going to be all upset about it. So it's not a question of ever fully working it out, but it's a question of recognizing it when it shows up. So, I've been working on it. I'm 76. I've been working on it for a long time too. As I said, it's a lifetime's work, but I'm a lot more conscious than I used to be. I'm sure so are you. And I'm also sure, I should maybe ask this as a question rather than as a statement, but even your cancer, didn't it teach you a whole lot?
Yeah. Taught me more than anything.
Exactly. So people see their misfortunes as just bad luck and something to get rid of. And I don't recommend cancer as a way of waking up. But some people, so many people I've spoken to, they have actually said this is the best teacher I've ever had. So and it taught you a lot about your trauma, and how to and I'm sure you're not the same person as you used to be. So you might say I haven't worked it fully out, but I'm sure that if I talk to yourself 20 years ago, you're much conscious now and much more in charge of your life in a free way than you were then. So that's
Right.
the real issue. The issue is not to whoever work it out. The issue is to keep growing and growing and growing. And yes,
Mm.
that's totally possible.
Well, that's good to know. Let's talk a little bit about perspective and where we are right now with, COVID-19, a worldwide pandemic. Um, we have information flying at us from every angle. We have the internet where we can search anything at any time. Um, how do we put this pandemic in perspective?
Well, for one thing, I think it's going to take a while for us to be able to do that. It'll be like a retrospective, you know. Like for example, I'm following all the rules. It's the only responsible thing to do. But I've had questions all along. Are we going to look back at some point and say, did we need to go so far? Because I'm very comfortable in my, I got financially, I'm not under pressure. I'm writing a book, so I'm doing what I should be doing right now. Anyway, I'm writing my next book.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been no big imposition on me. My biggest imposition is that I can't go swimming. Well, that's okay. I can go bicycling.
Right.
But there's a lot of people who've lost their jobs, who may not get their jobs back. There's a lot of people who are under stress now, elderly people, isolated people, who are really, really suffering. So I think it's legitimate questions that later on we'll have to look back and say, well, was this the right way to do it? I mean, right now, the only responsible thing to do is to follow the recommendations and the rules. This is not a time to be an anarchist. But I think it's time for everybody to still retain their own point of view and to keep thinking about it. Is this right for me? Is this not right? Do I agree? Do I not agree? And for everybody to make up their own minds, and neither to resist like some of these conspiracy theories denialists are, which I mean, that's an interesting phenomenon. This whole COVID was created by some cabal to control the world. There's
Yeah.
millions of people that believe that stuff.
Yes.
That's one way to look at it. The other way is to completely surrender any sense of self point of view and just taking everything as being said to you. I think we have to find our own perspective and find out who we are. And in retrospect, then we can all look back and say, well, okay, what did we learn? Like you were talking about how this crisis is revealing things about our society.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is that a lesson we're going to learn? Or are we going to be happily forget about it as soon as this is over and go back to living just as unconsciously as we did before? I don't know what the answer is. So when it comes
Yeah.
to perspective, I think it'll be a retrospective perspective.
Well, that's interesting because I mean, I'd like to think that we changed. I know people that have had massive heart attacks, and then they say they're going to change everything, and 3 months later they're smoking again and eating fast food. So and the same thing happens with people who recover from cancer or whatever it might be. We're all different. We all whatever. As a community, though, when big things happen, I like to think that moving forward, we, like when 9/11 happened, did that change who we are? I think it did. When we know what air pollution does to millions of people around the world health wise.
Well, look, I'm saying this new book I'm pointing out. By the way, my new book is entitled The Myth of Normal, Illness and Health and an Insane Culture. And you know how many Canadians die every year of air pollution?
How many?
Something like 80,000, I think. But
Wow.
maybe it's only 20,000.
Right.
Only, I say in quotation marks.
Yes.
Where's the big public outcry? Several hundred thousand Americans. You know how many people around the world die of air pollution every year? 8 million. Who's doing anything about it? So I'm not so convinced that COVID will teach us anything, because if we, the question is, are we open to learning?
Mm.
And the lessons are always there. The lessons have been there all along. The lessons about drug addiction and the drug war and how useless it is, and how narrow the treatment system is.
Right.
The lessons about the mind-body unity, the science that I've been talking about, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the lessons about the impact of air pollution on people's health. Um, they've been around forever.
Yeah. The lessons are there.
The lessons are there. The question is the openness to learning there?
Mm-hmm.
But that I don't want to predict. But I'm not necessarily optimistic.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you make some very good points there. But I guess you could say that this one's maybe different because we're all impacted, right? Because I think that's what happens. Unless, like, you don't care about cancer until it affects somebody that you know and love. You know what I mean? You can't imagine what that is until it impacts you directly.
Mhm.
Same with, I guess, air pollution. I don't know. And with COVID, we're all home, or we know somebody who's had it, or I don't know. Does it have to affect you directly, like impact you in order for you to care?
You know, I think people do care already. It's a question, though, of who draws the lessons. And we live in a society of inequality. I mean,
Yes.
the COVID is not affecting people equally. It can certainly hit anybody of any race, any class, any status. That's true. The virus doesn't make distinctions. But it's also true that's hitting the most stressed, the most marginalized, the most traumatized more harshly internationally. That's just the case. But
Hmm.
that's always been true. Health issues have always struck those people,
Right.
and so on.
Right.
That
How do
doesn't,
we?
but that has never caused us to change or to address the inequality in a society. So will this cause us? Maybe there's something to what you say, that this is more general and we can't help but be aware of it. Let's see.
I tend to wear rose-colored glasses a lot. I find it is a coping mechanism for sure. But can we deal? Can deal? That's not the right word. Can we is the best way to stay like trauma is hard, especially when you've had it's been your entire life, right? That and so how do people who aren't privileged to maybe see a therapist or to work through their trauma with somebody else, professional help, how do those people um, start processing their stress and trauma in order to live a more peaceful life?
Well, that's a difficult question. Um, as I said, I'm 76 and I've been teaching and working in this field for decades. But right now, as I came up against some challenges in my life, particularly writing this book is difficult for me right now. So it's challenging me. It's bringing up some feelings that are hard for me to handle. I'm talking to a therapist once a week now, but I can afford it. It's not covered in the Canadian medical plan, and so therapy isn't. And The only people that might get paid within the medical system are psychiatrists, most of them who are not trained to do any kind of therapy. They know better how to handle medications, which are sometimes helpful and necessary, but it's not therapy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how do people who can't afford it? That's a difficult question. But there are books, including my own and others, that give people a lot of insight. There are lots of talks on YouTube that you could watch that will help you. And again, there's any number of I'm not trying to beat my own drum here, but any number of my talks are available on YouTube. There's no cost. You don't join any channel. You don't have to go on any list. You just find them and you watch addiction or stress and health, all these things that we've been talking about. And then you can start thinking about yourself. You can also take 5 minutes a day and just ask yourself, what did my body say no today to? When, like, when did I get a headache? Did I get dry mouth? Did I get anxious? What's my body trying to tell me? So you can just hang out with yourself. You can learn meditation techniques that are stress reducers. There's classes for yoga and meditation, but you can also find them online for no cost at all. The real decision is to devote to make a decision to spend some time to self-care every day. Now, if you don't have 5 minutes for that, that just means that you don't value yourself very much. And if you don't value yourself very much, that's because you were traumatized as a kid. Otherwise, you would value yourself. So can you find that few minutes just to hang out with yourself? Just start with that. And, beyond that, you can research whatever resources that might be in your community to have somebody to talk to.
But I bet most of us don't even, we just don't even find 5 minutes to do that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's really hard to be with yourself for 5 minutes even.
It's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
And that's itself is a sign of trauma.
Mm.
But you got to start somewhere.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. What advice do you have for people who are, home right now? They're in self-isolation. They are with their kids. How do we live a happy life in this isolation? What are some suggestions you have?
First of all, I always laugh when people think they have some kind of wisdom about happiness. I don't have any wisdom. I'm trying to figure it out myself.
What makes you happy?
I don't even know, well, I mean, I happen to be in a great relationship,
Yeah.
But I'm not always happy. I'm only been married 50 years, but that doesn't mean I'm always happy in the relationship. But
50 years?
50, yeah.
Wow.
But it's a source of great support. I don't know that the goal is happiness to pursue. I think the goal is just try and be in as much contact with yourself as you can be and be as true to yourself as you can be. The happiness will follow. But you know what? My friend Rafi, if you got kids at home.
Yes, I know Rafi.
Shake your sillies. Shake your sillies out every day,
It does work.
Yeah.
It really does work. And we all need to do that sometimes.
Play, drum, chant, sing, dance, go crazy, By the way, what do Aboriginal people do? They sing and dance and chant a lot. And we've forgotten how to do that. We pay other people to sing for us. But it's no longer participatory.
Yeah.
So join a drumming circle online. I mean, do something,
Right. I just want to say thank you so much for all of your perspective on everything is so helpful. And of course, you can go to Dr. Maté's website, which is drgabormate.com. And that is drgabormate.com. And be sure to join us here on TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart every Tuesday and Thursday. Dr. Maté, thank you so, so much.
My pleasure to speak with you. Take care.